Okay, yeah, so again, this is where the recording starts. So here's a quick agenda, recent changes, upcoming changes, and we'll have some thoughts and suggestions for later. The big thing is to update your code. Please don't use the one on the website right now. If you look at the website later and see that it says 1.0, that's the good one to use, okay? But there's two big changes I wanted to point out to people. In one case, because it'll change what you sort of see when you run the code. And then the other one, which is the one we'll talk about first, is that there have been some pretty significant changes to the parallel I/O in the code. I worked on this quite a bit over the fall, and everything seems to be working, but you could still run into some issues, and so I want to make people aware of this. But basically, when I first started writing the code, I would add all these different kinds of outputs, like the global averages and the shell slices, sort of one at a time. I didn't have a unified interface for these things. Checkpoints had their own set of subroutines, and in each of these subroutines, there were basically the same or similar calls to MPI-IO. And so what this meant, though, is that anytime you wanted to add a new output type, it was quite a bit of work. I would typically go copy and paste one and then modify it. It was also tough to debug. Basically, I realized that as the one who wrote the code, I had a hard time editing or maintaining this, and certainly nobody else is going to be able to. So over the fall, what I did is I created sort of a new parallel I/O interface that all the outputs, including the checkpoints in the code, use. And so if you're trying to get a sense for how this works, if you're wanting to do some modifications to the code yourself, you can look in spherical io.f90, which is where this stuff used to all live, basically. And now that's kind of a wrapper where there are different instances of a diagnostic object type, and those funnel down to parallel io.f90. So what this really boils down to is that there's several fewer thousand lines of code now. And the calls to MPI-IO are confined really to two subroutines in parallel io.f90. So there's a lot less redundant code. With Lauren Matilsky in particular, I think we tracked down, he was the unfortunate guinea pig. I think we tracked down all the bugs. There were some bugs in this when I first posted this update, but we got those sorted out. But if you do run into anything weird with the output, you should let me know. The other thing is that because everything kind of uses the same interface now, technically every output type can be cached. So the point probes had this functionality before, which is that you could store several records that would normally be written to the file one at a time. You could store those in memory and then dump those all at once. This way you're not doing tons and tons of small file writes. Basically anything can do this now, but it's activated for the global averages and the shell averages, since those are often really small writes to a file. And so just like with the point probes, there are these two keywords that you can set in the main input file. I've got them listed here. And so if you want to store, say, 10 global average records in memory before you write, you can just set this global average cache size to that value. But I just want to call people's attention to this because, you know, there's only so much testing that, you know, a handful of us have done so far in terms of really sort of stress testing the I/O. So if you do run into any problems, let me know. One thing I would suggest, we've, I don't know if he's on here. Lauren gets a little trigger happy about contacting the Pleiades support before he contacts me when there's an issue with the code. So please do contact me first if you see anything related to the I/O before we start bringing in the sysadmins on a machine. That gets a little confusing sometimes. The other big change, though, that I think is a really good change from the user's point of view. So I will say this last set of changes should be completely transparent to everyone. Everything works just like it used to from the user standpoint. You just have these two extra caching keywords available.
Can I just ask a quick question, Nick?
Yes, please.
Sorry if I missed it. It's Kian here. Did you Did you say what the units of those size are? Is that like number of records, or is it like
Yes,
bytes, or?
it's the number of records.
Okay.
I've thought about trying to put in some memory keywords as well, and then we could have Rayleigh work that out at initialization time. But at the moment, no, this is just, so if you have, normally if you have 10 records per file and you set your cache size to 5, then you'll do 2 writes to that file.
Okay.
You write 5 records at once, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The only thing I will mention, actually, Kian, is that that was Kian talking, right?
Yes, yeah, it was.
Yeah. Sorry. The only thing I will mention is that your generic input doesn't use this interface yet. You know, I had touched base with you via email.
Yeah, and then we never followed up on that. Sorry about that.
Yes. So, sorry about that. I did that before Christmas, and things got a little crazy. So we should touch base on that, because I do have a module, kind of a draft of a new generic input module that uses the same interface. I think it's mostly we would need to possibly change the file format just a little bit of the generic input.
Yeah, sure. If you want to send it to me, I'll take a look at that, and I'll take a look at the new master and try and see if I can understand it.
Okay. The other big change, though, this is the one that if you use the new version of the code, you will notice right away. So, you know, the old checkpoints worked where basically we saved all the state variables, and we saved some information about the grid. And whenever you generated a set of checkpoint files, those were all dumped into the same directory. So it causes a little bit of a headache if you wanted to copy a checkpoint, because you had to make sure you grabbed all the files. But the other thing was that the checkpoints weren't technically complete. You still needed a main input file. Now that we've got this equation coefficients, sorry, how do I say this? Now that we're able to modify the constant and non-constant coefficients in the set of PDEs that Rayleigh solves, that's also information that we really want to have in the checkpoint. Similarly, boundary conditions. You know, Kian's got this nice boundary condition interface where you can use the generic input to set boundary conditions. All of this was missing from the checkpoint files. And so that meant that if you wanted to share your checkpoint with somebody, you also had to make sure you got the main input, the equation coefficients, etc. So the new version of Rayleigh creates a separate directory for each checkpoint, which is what it should have done in the first place. And then everything that's needed to restart a model is written to that directory. This includes a main input file that has everything defined. So even the stuff that you don't set, where you leave as a default value, that is specified in this file. So that kind of piggybacked on a modification to the code that Ryan Orbidal made some time back. So you have you see all the stuff you actually can set in the code in the file that's stored in the checkpoint directory. The equation coefficients are written there, and then the boundary conditions are also written in that directory. I will say I haven't tested restarting with the boundary conditions in the checkpoint directory much. I think I did a small test. So, that may be good for somebody to try if you're using this generic input interface. So there may be a little bit more testing that should be done there. But you can always just use your main input file and specify your boundary condition files like normal too. Okay. But the idea here is that now if you want to share a checkpoint with someone or move it between machines, you just grab that directory, and that's literally all you need. What I will mention is that you'll see this immediately when you run the code, but this is also fully backwards compatible. So the idea is that Rayleigh, when you try to restart from a checkpoint, it first looks for this directory with that number. And if it doesn't find it, then it assumes you're using the old format. So you can take your old checkpoints and just run with the new version of the code, but new checkpoints will be written into their own directories. Okay.
Nick?
Mm-hmm.
So the number directory made in based on the checkpoint directory.
Yeah, there will be there are numbered subdirectories in the checkpoint directory
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I'll mention, you can now actually just run the code without even, so suppose you want to restart from one of these existing checkpoint files and you're on a new machine or somebody shared a checkpoint with you. All you really need is you need that checkpoint and the subdirectory, and you need a copy of Rayleigh, and you can just tell it to run with this full restart flag and it will grab everything in that directory. You don't even have to copy out main input and modify it if you don't want to. Okay. So yeah, so you would have, for checkpoint 10,000, you would have a subdirectory, 10,000 with zeros padded based on how many digits you use for output. And you can just run with this flag. But you can also copy the input file out and modify it as desired. And then you just run Rayleigh as normal. So if you do the full restart, it completely ignores the main input in your directory. I know some of you run really long runs. So if your number of digits isn't the default 8 and you want to use this, you just pass it this input digits flag and tell it the number of digits that you use in your output files. Okay. So that's all. Those are just the two big changes I kind of wanted to point people to. One, because you'll see a different format for the checkpoints, and the other is that hopefully you won't see anything, but if you saw some strange behavior in your IO, you should let me know. Okay. Any questions on that?
Yes, Nick. So
Yes.
just to paraphrase to make sure I understand, when Rayleigh first starts up, it looks for one of these new checkpoint directories. If it doesn't find it, it will look for the old format. I assume that includes the main input. So if I have a main input in the new checkpoint format directory, and I have a main input file just sitting on top of the run directory, there's no problem with that.
That's right. What it would do is if it has when it's looking for the old format, it says, okay, I don't see a subdirectory with that number. And so then it pretends it's running just like it used to when it restarts. Okay. So it will, you need the same set of files that you would normally need. But then moving forward, all the checkpoints that it generates are self-contained, basically.
And so when you are first starting off without any checkpoints, where do you put the main input file? Where are you used to?
Oh yeah. Main input still works as normal. It's just that if you grab somebody shares a checkpoint with you, or you move it between machines, you actually don't need to have the main input file if you don't want to. You can just use this full restart option. There is an input file in the checkpoint directory now.
Okay. Thank you.
Nick? Sorry.
Rayleigh only uses the input file in the checkpoint directory if you use the full restart flag. That's a way of not having to have the input file there. Otherwise, it will always use main input just like it normally would.
Nick?
Yeah, just Sakura. Does that answer your question, Brad?
Yes, I believe it does.
This is just an extra little feature I've added here. This is not the thing on the screen with the full restart. You do not have to do this. You can still use your main input file as normal.
Okay.
This is just a way of saying, hey, I just want Rayleigh and a checkpoint file, and I don't want to have to fiddle with the main input file, etc. You can just run.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Hiro?
Yeah, so if we start a simulation with all the format of the directory structure, so that is a new checkpoint file output under the number directory or keep the staying the old format?
The new checkpoints will be
Yes,
written in the new.
can we start the old actually? Sorry, okay. Yeah, I wonder we can use the old format of the old format in the checkpoint file.
Yeah, you could take a model directory right now
Yes.
with a checkpoint directory that has all the checkpoint files in it.
Yes, and it continues.
Start running it with the new version of Rayleigh, and it will be able to tell that it needs to use the old format, but all the new ones it generates will be in the new format.
New format. Okay, I got it.
Yeah. So it's fully backwards compatible. You'll just notice
Yeah.
your checkpoint directory looks very different moving forward.
Yes. Yes. So read the old format, but write the new writing to the new format for the new data.
That's right. That's right. And I don't have any more of that Fortran unformatted whatever with the grid files. Everything is Stream.io now. So
that's great. That's great.
Any other questions on that?
Just it's Cian here again, just in terms of the backwards compatibility question again. How clever is this input digits option? If you tell it the non-default number of digits and it doesn't find anything, will it go looking for the default or will it just give up?
I think it'll just give up.
Okay.
This is just, I know like you and Peter have like what, 10 digits or something?
We run into this a lot, yeah. So it's great that it exists. I just want to know how to approach it. That's great.
And this is really just for use with this full restart flag, right? This is if you just want to grab the checkpoint, move it over. You can always copy the main input file out of the checkpoint directory and modify that however you want to. And you just run Rayleigh without the full restart flag, right? This is just an added feature right here.
Are these flags available as options in the main input as well, or are they only command line?
You can change the input digits somehow in the input file, right? In the output digits, we fixed that some time ago.
Okay.
This input digits flag though really is just for use with full restart here.
Okay.
This was just so if, maybe you wanted to just, I don't know. To me, I get tired of copying too many things around. I guess I was being lazy and didn't want to copy the main input file out of a directory that I just copied around anyway. That's all this is.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So you could, you could also just, you don't need to use this full restart at all with the new checkpoints. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. I think I just forgotten that we can set that in the main input already. So that's great.
Yeah, it's in there. It's if you look in probably in controls.f90.
Oh, I'm sure we have it in our main input files, and I've just been copying it around blindly without noticing it.
Yeah, we have integer output digits and integer input digits in the IO controls name list. So if you find this slide confusing, just ignore it. You don't have to use full restart. This is just if you're kind of lazy. Okay. So some upcoming changes. So the main thing I'm trying to push to right now is getting what I'll call version 1.0 released and posted on the website. The main thing that needs to be done now is that some of the documentation needs to be updated. If anyone wants to help with that at all, the truth is a lot of the documentation is fairly out of date at this point. If people wanted to, update small things here and there, that would be much appreciated. The main thing I'll be doing is trying to update the documentation with regard to these new changes and the PDE coefficient stuff that we added back this summer. Okay. Longer term, it's one thing I think we're pretty close to being able to do now. It would be good to get some better 3D visualization pipelines and examples up. We have a little bit with YT. There's a notebook in the repository, I think, that Maria put together. I also think it's not linked to in the documentation, so I'll try to get that fixed. Freddie and I have been using Vapor again lately, and so we probably have some stuff we can put together for Vapor. Freddie's also used peer review quite a bit, and I think that's what you guys use, isn't it, Kian?
Yeah, that's what I use with the 3D output, that's for sure.
Yeah, so it may be good to have kind of just some simple examples for all three of those viewers. But that's all just kind of long-term documentation. The other thing that's kind of interesting is for a project that Freddie and I have been working on with some guys at UCLA, including John, if he's on here, is we've got a fully compressible version of the code right now. What I would like to do is get it somehow wrapped into the to the main branch of the code, and I'm not quite sure what the best way to do that is. But we put that together this summer, and the code has changed quite a bit since then, and so it's already this compressible version is already out of sync with everything, and I'd like to get that sorted out. I don't know if anybody's interested in working on that with me. I think what we were doing is we were, when you build the code, you can point it with the configure script to basically like a patch directory where you store other files that overwrite the files Rayleigh normally uses. And so I think we have this kind of implemented as a really sophisticated patch to the code right now. But if anyone's interested in that at all, maybe touch base with me offline, because it does work, but it keeps getting out of date with respect to everything else. And the other one is that we're still hoping maybe to have Cartesian domains at some point, but that really requires a sparse solve and a different treatment of the Chebyshev polynomials. We need to move to a what's the word? We want to move from a collocation method to a
Galerkin basis.
Yeah, I think it's like a tau method, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is sort of something coming down the pipeline, I hope, but I'm not sure when that will actually materialize.
Nick?
Mm-hmm.
Nick, do you think Cartesian domain with a word in all directions?
No, this would be just an infinite plane layer.
Infinite plane layer, yeah, a little bit wonder if Chebyshev is a good approach or not. Ne?
Yeah, periodic. It would be periodic in the horizontal and bounded in the vertical.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, for the period.
There's some value in running box convection studies too.
Yeah.
And so the other possibility, there is this finite element with Chebyshev implementation Rayleigh. That might be something we could do in the short term, because that when you do that, you get matrices that are block banded, so you can use a band solve for those. But with the collocation scheme as it is right now, though, it becomes very unwieldy to do, a full Chebyshev grid in the vertical in a Cartesian domain.
Yeah, and probably horizontal would be in a Fourier.
Yeah, so I had a version of this working several years ago.
Yeah.
But the problem is that when you do your solve with spherical harmonics, because the time stepping matrices are not, they are independent of the azimuthal wave number m.
Oh.
So hang on, I hear a crying child. Just 1 sec, I'm sorry. Are you okay? You fell down? Okay, thanks, sorry. Anyway, you can group multiple right-hand sides together for a single matrix. It depends on basically just spherical harmonic degree L and R, but you're not able to do that in the same way when you're in Cartesian. So
Yes.
give me a hug. I'm on a phone call, okay?
Can I take my mask?
In a bit. I need to help you with the paint.
The ice painting.
Oh, okay, sure. Go sit with Arya. Take your jacket off, okay? Sorry. Hey, we made it half an hour though. Anyway, these are just some things coming up. So if you're interested in any of these longer term ones, or you're interested in helping with the documentation, please just let me know. Then I thought I would just open this up to discussion. But really quick, I have kind of one thought here. I really could use some more help and participation from people when I submit a pull request. I'm trying to kind of play by the rules and, put my modifications up for review. But this checkpoint update just sat on GitHub for 17 days and no one commented. And I understand that, some of these are pretty complicated modifications to the code, but even if you're not comfortable reading or reviewing the code itself, you can always at least test out the new version and let me know if things work, So do try to keep an eye on the GitHub page, and by all means, let me know if you find something wrong when you test things out. Otherwise, I thought I would just see if people had any other thoughts, and I might just make a note here. But that's really all I got.
Thanks, Nick. This is Renee. We had a similar problem in Aspect when trying to support different formulations for the code. So you were talking about the compressible version of Rayleigh.
Mm-hmm.
If you want, I could talk you through the solutions that we found to make that work without recompiling. So essentially without keeping a separate set of patches that then need to be applied during compile time, but just choose the options at runtime. I'm not sure if that directly translates from our C++ implementation to a Fortran implementation, if that would work. But I could at least talk about how we did that.
Yeah, that would be great to talk about offline for sure. Yeah. Maybe I'll shoot you an email after this.
Sure.
So with regards to code review, do people feel comfortable being sort of tagged explicitly? For example, Nick, if you think there's somebody out there that should be reviewing it, mention them in the pull request. Please so and so. Do people feel comfortable doing that, or?
I'd be fine with that.
I'm happy to tag
Just
people.
offline, so you can tag me for some things.
I think sometimes people just need some encouragement, or maybe they don't know that they're actually the person with that expertise who could review things for you.
It's also been, I think, a lot of job applications are due around the holidays and after the holidays too. So
yeah, things get lost when they get down in the stack, or just make a re-request perhaps that these are pending.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, I guess that's all.
Okay, I have one other question is how is this group feeling about trying to get together again sometime later this year for another hack? Certainly we're talking probably late summer, early fall, or trying to do something virtually, or punting it till next year as well.
I mean,
It might be too early to say.
yeah.
Travel through the university is currently banned, domestic and foreign.
Well, I mean, the question we would need to discuss right now is not if it would be in person and at what time it would be specifically, right? The question is more like, is there interest? And then we can find whatever form is necessary or is possible.
Well, so I felt like the last one that we had this past summer was very productive, and I suppose it really depends a little bit on what. I mean, I'm guessing people find this code useful since there's 20 of us on here. It would be good. I think these things are good in the sense that it gets other people comfortable with making changes to the code. Makes it a little bit less like it's just my code. For me, I'm wondering when in the fall is a good time. I mean, should we maybe set up a poll and just see what people are thinking? Certainly right now, I agree it's probably a bit early to start scheduling.
I guess one issue for me,
You know, yes and no, because a lot of people are already delaying meetings. They're saying like, well, let's have it in October. I'm going like, well, actually I have 2 high priority events already on my schedule in October. So people are starting to kind of try to capture those dates. So I think if we just kind of are able to talk about tentative dates, that might be helpful.
for me, one other issue, is this working? Not working.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Just.
For me, one other issue is that if there's travel in the fall, there's a Dynamo workshop in Cambridge, I think throughout October, and I think it goes all the way through December in a long form program. So it may be a little hard to do it roughly after October for some people.
I think the I think it starts mid-September, doesn't it?
Yeah, September. My apologies. You're right.
Yeah.
So
wow.
It's a good chunk of change. It's a long program. So that may make it a little hard for people at that time if there's travel.
So it sounds like we have a really narrow window to do this if we wanted to do this year and travel to do it.
Well, I guess the other question is, are there additions and modifications to the code that people want to see made that, a workshop like this would be useful for?
It sounds like you have a really good work plan, Nick, and it sounds like you could use some help. So getting people started on it would be really valuable. But as I said, I think we have it sounds like a really narrow time window to do it this year if we're talking about late summer to early fall. That pretty much limits some of us to a 1-month period in the last 2 weeks of August, and sounds like the first 2 weeks of September.
Yeah, and I could probably swing a week in late August. I think assuming my parents travel back out here, I'll have some help with the kids then. So.
For my part, I'd definitely be interested. So, if it's possible.
Yeah,
I don't know. I wonder what things will look like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm pretty much, I think, not in any in-person planning mode through the end of July. Even if they squash this curve, that means it's going to lengthen the timelines for everything. Kill less people, but lengthen the duration of the be cautious period.
Yeah.
Just because logistically, we don't want also people to be like scrambling at the last minute because, it adds to at least to my gray hairs.
But if we would if there's enough interest and we can agree on some form of timeline, it may not be long, maybe just be shorter, maybe just a few days. Then we can always decide which format is best suited, right? So we have experimented with other forms of meetings in the last year. For example, we had a purely virtual aspect user meeting in January that worked really well. It was just 2 or 3 days, and it was mostly presentations and discussions and not so much hands-on work like during a hackathon. But that would be an alternative. I think having regular user chats is also a good thing. You mentioned that at the beginning, Nick.
Yeah, I thought I may try to do this once a month or maybe once every 2 months. Kind of.
Yep.
Certainly, we could have like a quick check-in once a month, and if people tune in and say they don't have anything to discuss, then that's it. You know what I mean? But I do think it might be good to keep everyone on the same page. This one, I felt like I really needed to point people to a few big changes to the code. But I mean, I guess the other thing is, maybe if you're, timelines aside, if you're interested in helping with any of these things, maybe let me know, because like Lorraine said, I could use some help. I put quite a bit of my time into this in the fall, and I really need to start kind of rediverting some of my time to the science projects that I'm also funded off of. And so I don't expect to do too much more with the code aside from update some of the documentation here for the next few months. But if someone wanted to help with some of these things, that could be really productive.
Yeah, and as Nick said, I mean, I'm really excited to see so many people on this call. But what really makes it a community code is contributions from the community.
Okay. Well, why don't I can follow up with one of these forum kind of polls again, and we could see when people might loosely think they're available in the fall for an in-person meeting if it's possible. But maybe it needs to be pushed out a little bit to early 2021. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see, or else we can see what we can do virtually as well.
I think Renee's idea is a good initial planning position of a virtual meeting, shorter, but make something happen that's actually tractable, even in a non-traveling environment.
Yeah.
I think it's good to get that on the books, or again, to keep things rolling and real.
So this time seemed like it worked for almost everybody. I know, for instance, Nick Brummel's not on here, but he had a last-minute doctor's appointment or something. So if I were to schedule something a month from now, does this kind of 11 a.m. on Monday work for people?
Yes. Yep.
Cool.
Good for me.
Well, I'll follow up then with a quick poll, and then we can maybe go from there.
Great, thanks so much, Nick.
Perfect,
You've
yeah.
done a great amount of work. I didn't appreciate how much stuff needed to kind of be redone and how much work the restructuring was. It looks very, very